So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where the Middle East unites into one country. Now, of course, as we know, the Middle East is a very diverse place, so unification between all of these countries is very, very unlikely. Although in today's scenario, we will be uniting them and throwing away all the different reasons why they can't be united, and we'll just be pushing everyone together and forming basically an Islamic empire. So if you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel because we are still pushing for 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. We have around 25-ish days to go, and honestly, all the support is going to help. If you guys have friends, family who aren't subscribed, get them to subscribe because we are close. We are gaining support and gaining numbers, and honestly, if we keep up this track record, we could do it. So it's up to you guys, and let's go ahead and jump into the scenario. All right, so here we have the Middle Eastern Empire. I'm just gonna call it the Middle East in this scenario because it's just an easier name, and this isn't necessarily an empire video, although it kind of is because it's going to be formatted the same. Also, OBS updated, or it didn't update, but I finally updated it, and everything's a little bit weird. So the audio issue should be fixed. I say that as I watch my mouth not being sync with the audio, but whatever. But if anything else is weird, my apologies in advance. But now that the Middle East is united, they're going to go after some smaller countries around them in order to expand said empire, if you want to call it that. First off is Georgia. Now Georgia, unfortunately, is sandwiched between two ginormous countries and powers, so yeah, and to make matters even worse, Russia wants to get South Ossetia and Abkhazia, so they join in on this war. The Middle Easterners push around and get a majority of the country. However, Russia does finally enter in, and they manage to get the rest of it. Of course, the Middle East did occupy a portion of South Ossetia, therefore there is going to have to be some reworks with the Russians, but let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. All right, and just like that, the southern portion of Georgia is annexed by the Middle East, and that's pretty much the only weaker country they have around them. You could argue that, like, oh, Libya or Sudan, there's a weak, but they're also ginormous countries. Then we go over to Europe, Greece, I mean NATO, but in this video NATO does not exist, just to make the expansion of the Middle East a little bit easier. Then we go to Central Asia, Turkmenistan. I mean, that's probably pretty easy, but there's no real, I guess, value in invading it. Afghanistan's impossible to invade, and then you don't want to mess with Pakistan, so yeah, the Middle East has to make a pretty big decision right now. And seeing as their main objectives are in Europe, they decide not to go full force just yet and want to do some side quests, if you will. Doing these side quests will basically just, you know, get them more economy, more military, more volunteers, more equipment, more supplies, and everything you need to carry out a very long and excruciating war in Europe. So the Middle East declares war on Libya. Now, Libya didn't do anything to deserve this, and you know, they're already in a really tough situation, but the Middle East does not care. They primarily focus in on the north. In fact, that is the only place they focus in on as they start to push across the northern Libyan coast, down and around, and their main sites are of course Tripoli. But at this point they have wiped out a significant amount of people, well, not people, but like military assets of Libya. No, they are not killing civilians. Now up the coast, and finally we have the capturing of Tripoli and the entire Libyan coast. We don't actually have Libya surrender just yet, so this does require the Middle East to spend additional resources and manpower to push into the Libyan desert and chase out any escaping Libyans. But eventually there is finally a peace treaty made and Libya surrenders. So let's go ahead and take a look at said peace treaty. Alright, phase 1 of this treaty includes the Middle East annexing all of the northern coast of Libya, and I said phase 1 because there's going to be a second phase, and that is the partitioning of Libya. Now honestly, there are less countries invited to this partitioning than you would think, since, you know, Libya borders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries. There's actually only 3 invited. This could be foreshadowing, but I'm not going to spoil anything. But the countries invited include Algeria, Niger, and Chad. These 3 countries are all given the option to negotiate and divide up the remaining portion of Libya, which would not be sustainable enough to last on its own. So Niger gets the first pick, and of course they're not going to do anything too crazy here because it would just look bad on the map, so they choose this big chunk of land. Following this is Chad's pick. They don't do anything too crazy either because, once again, we don't want it to be too horrendous on the map. And finally, we have Algeria's pick, and they are going to get a majority of what's remaining. So all the way bordering to Chad, they now push up and essentially just divide the remaining territory. So with this, we now have the borders of Africa looking something like this. Now what are we going to do with the remainder of Libya? No one really wants it, so the Middle East just goes ahead and makes it a puppet state, even though it's basically just a part of the Middle East, as it's really now it's really not sustainable. Before it wasn't, now it really isn't. So with that land annexed in a kind of a sneaky way, the Middle East has expanded even further, and they've also expanded their influence into the countries of Algeria, Niger, and Chad. Now, Sudan and Tunisia are a little bit skeptical of why they weren't invited to this land grab because, honestly, they both could have gotten a good portion of land out of it. But they don't really do anything about it yet because they don't see the Middle East as, like, as big as a threat as they should. In the following couple weeks, we have the Middle East opening up an economical alliance with Algeria, and this could also be some foreshadowing. I'm not going to spoil it though. So now the Middle East has its sights on Central Asia, and to be more particular, Turkmenistan. Now Turkmenistan, I don't know much about it, but I do know that there aren't much geographical features of Turkmenistan, so the Middle Easterners are going to have an amazing time just pushing through the plains of this country. They mainly focus on the coast, wiping out all ports to the Caspian Sea, and from here they enter in from the Iranian front. It doesn't take too long for Turkmenistan to finally surrender, and now we have the incorporation of this territory into this territory. So instead of just doing a puppeting move, they actually annex all of Turkmenistan, which gives them a really big front with the countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. But the Middle East does publicly state that they have no intentions or ambitions in Central Asia, and Turkmenistan was the final front that they would push into over here in the east. But that doesn't mean that they are done over here, and that's going to limit their front options. Obviously, they don't want to go back into Africa as they just pulled their troops from there. So, hey Europe, how you doing? So a couple of days prior to a possible invasion, we have the Middle East mobilizing all of its navy. So much so that it probably violates a lot of international treaties. But as Greece sees this occur, they also mobilize their navy, and we have a pretty big standoff between the blue team and the red team navies. Now of course Greece is going to be an underdog in a possible war, and that possible war just became a reality. Now once again, Greece is not going to have a good time here, but they do have some allies who are willing to step up and help them out. Such allies actually include Serbia, as well as Montenegro, Bulgaria, and Romania, and that's about it. So how much does this limit the red team? It really doesn't. They expand their naval front up to cover more of Romania, and their navy even pushes over towards the coast of Italy to kind of block any Balkan ships that would want to get out. Now this is going to actually piss off a lot of countries over here in the Northern Balkans and Central Europe, as this is a pretty important trade route for them. But for now, the Middle East does not care, and they set their ambitions once again onto the Balkans. So Turkey starts to roll in, and it just isn't going well for the blue team at all, as they are unable to stop the Middle Easterners. They eventually meet with North Macedonia, which cuts off Greece from the rest of the blue team. From here we have the capturing of Sofia, and then we have red team troops entering into Serbia. But now it's time for some allies for the red team, and honestly, you guys probably saw this coming because they aren't even colored in, and they probably would have been. But these allies include Albania, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is a slight trend with these four countries, which they all have a fairly high percentage of Islamic citizens. If that fits in with the correlation, I don't know, but these guys are also prominent enemies of the people on the blue team, so it kind of makes sense. Albania mainly focuses in on meeting up with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they do the exact same. Of course, it wouldn't be a video unless Bosnia and Herzegovina erupted into a civil war, which it does. This requires the red team to refocus some of its energy up north into knocking out Serbia, which after taking their capital, they pretty much do, and the Serbs surrender. And following that is the death of the civil war in Bosnia. Now this little distraction did cost the red team a little bit of flexibility, as Romania pushes into Serbia, recapturing some of the Serbian land that was just taken over, and they also push down into Bulgaria, reliberating Sofia and getting very close to the this water, the Aegean Sea. We also see Greece push into southern North Macedonia and Albania, and now the red team navy is about to do something very cool, and that is destroying the blue team navy. Everyone was pretty surprised that it lasted this long, but nonetheless it did fall, and now we have waves upon waves of landings being made all across these Greek isles. We have one being made in the south of Greece, which eventually captures this entire peninsula, pushes over and captures Athens, and from here we have Greece being pushed all the way back up north until it is met with the invading armies that are going into Albania and North Macedonia. From here, Greece decides to withdraw its troops from Albania and North Macedonia in order to protect the Greek homelands. Using these extra defenders, they push down and manage to capture a little bit more of the Greek peninsula. However, they are stopped short when trying to retake Athens. Back up north, Romania's show of power is being suppressed by the Middle East, as we now have red team troops entering into southern Romania. In a similar tactic to Greece, we have Romania withdrawing all of its troops from Bulgaria and Serbia in order to protect the homeland. Now, I don't know about you, but this war is not going in your favor, so you might as well throw in the white flag, and that's exactly what Romania and Greece decided to do. Romania will probably get out of this war just fine, but Greece might be in for some trouble. Let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. So a very noticeable change in the Balkans here as the red team expands its influence and power even more. We have the Middle East annexing a majority of Greece and a good portion of Bulgaria, while the rest of Bulgaria and a slither of Serbia are made into a puppet state. We have Albania and North Macedonia expanding their borders both north and south. We have Bosnia and Herzegovina expanding their problem of Serbs and getting even more Serbs. And then we have Romania losing a little bit of land in the south here, but nothing too crucial. And now it's finally time to see the big event: the formation of the Islamic Alliance. Countries joining this alliance include Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania, North Macedonia, Algeria, and finally, weirdly enough, South Sudan. Now I know that there are two particular countries which don't really fit the memo and the name of the alliance, but you know, it's Turkey, or it's the Middle East's alliance, so they can kind of do whatever they want. But yeah, North Macedonia and South Sudan might be a little bit of an outcast in this alliance, but nonetheless, they are still members of it, and they are happy. Following the formation of this alliance is the formation of fear amongst countries that border these countries. I mean, taking a look at the Middle East right now, they are a very sizably large country. If you include their puppet states, they're probably one of the largest countries in the world, and they're going to exert the power a little bit. Their first step is to invade Tunisia. Why do they want to invade Tunisia? I don't know. Maybe because they're not in the alliance. You know, earlier we saw them not get any land out of the whole Libya partition, so maybe that's why. But something that the red team didn't really account for was the fact that other countries are gonna participate in this war. Such countries include Sudan, as well as, surprisingly enough, Ethiopia, and finally Morocco. So now it does appear that the Middle East has gotten itself into a little bit of trouble, and yeah, so there's gonna be some problems, especially over here in South Sudan. They're gonna lose South Sudan most likely. They're gonna lose some land into southern Egypt. Looks like Algeria might get beaten up a little bit by Morocco. Let's go ahead and focus in on where this war started, which is Tunisia. Algerian troops overwhelmingly outnumber the Tunisian troops, as well as, of course, the Middle Eastern troops. They push in as well. And overall, Tunisia is no real match. However, they don't surrender, as they want to serve as much as a distraction for the blue team as possible. This works pretty well, as Morocco was able to push into Algerian territory. And down south, we have the complete just decimation of South Sudan. They didn't do anything to deserve this, but it's going to happen anyway. Overall, pretty even battle so far if you discount this. But now we head up north to the border of Egypt, where we have the blue team making some moves. Specifically Sudan, of course, because they are the one at the border. They go up along the Egyptian coast and then along the Nile River. From here, they're able to make some impressive gains until they are eventually stopped by the Middle East. Back over to Tunisia, we finally have them having their last holdout over here in Tunis, and it doesn't last very long as they are forced to surrender. Following this, we have Algeria relocating all of its army over here to Morocco, where they are now able to push back the advancing Moroccan military. And Morocco does something very interesting here. They surrender. That's right, they technically had the advantage, but they decided to throw in the white flag. So this is going to save them a little bit in the peace treaty, but Morocco just kind of put two and two together and realized that this war was not going to work. So ultimately, the smart thing to do. However, Ethiopia and Sudan are not going to see this, and they're just going to keep going. They managed to capitulate South Sudan, which is good for you, I guess. But they themselves are about to face the same fate as South Sudan, as the Middle East is now rolling into Sudan. They mainly focus in on the coast, which goes extremely well, and eventually they do cross over the entire border. We do have a little bit of a sneaky situation here, as we have Eritrea joining the war. And who would have known? It's filled with Middle Eastern troops. These troops immediately dart into Ethiopia in hopes of taking their capital and knocking them out of the war. Of course, this was a surprise thing, so it goes extremely well. Ethiopia is once again unable to stop Eritrea, and we have the country's capitulation. Following this, we have Sudan doing the most heroic thing they've ever done, and that is not surrendering. That's right, they're going to try their best to hold off the red team, but I mean, in the end, it doesn't really matter. Sudan is pushed all the way back to South Sudan, which is ironic enough, and then South Sudan just kind of pops back into existence. So yeah, complete red team domination in this war. Let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, so this peace treaty is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Starting off in Morocco, we have them losing their southern coast, which is honestly surprising if you don't get the logic of it, but basically Morocco, they it's weird. So they claim Western Sahara, right? But Western Sahara itself isn't an actual entity, but at the same time it kind of is an entity that isn't recognized. But now this kind of just draws the line quite literally and splits them apart, which pretty much guarantees Western Sahara independence. Now, as for Morocco, the reason this happened is because Algeria just wants easier access to the Atlantic Ocean. Before they had to go up and around like this, now they can just go like that. So it's a lot easier. Now coming here to Tunisia, it's a little bit of an interesting scenario. There is actually a pretty big dispute over this treaty between Algeria and the Middle East. Basically, Algeria wanted all of this area, but the Middle East said no because we contributed, and overall they're just fighting about it. It doesn't really matter because Algeria could just technically go through their territory, but you know, trade routes over here to the Middle East would be a lot easier if they just had that coast. And maybe not even just the Middle East, but also like the Balkans. But now moving on down to Sudan and Ethiopia, we have them losing, of course, a lot of land. Sudan loses a lot of their northern land and a lot of their southern land over to South Sudan, with Ethiopia getting carved up by South Sudan and Eritrea. And of course, these guys are also allies to the Middle East. So yeah, the Middle East has, well, look at it in the entire map. It's definitely safe to say that the Middle East is a world power, if not a superpower. The influence and the power they've managed to spread in this video just shows that if the Middle East united, it would be bad if you were their enemy. But yeah, so this is what could possibly happen if the Middle East united. Of course, this isn't likely because the Middle East is a very diverse and hard to get along place, but just letting you guys know, if you all united together, maybe this could be you. And yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. So if you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on this video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel if you're new. We are once again aiming for 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. We have 25 days to do it, and yeah, so it's in your hands. I can't subscribe to myself, so but yeah, if you know family members, friends who aren't subscribed, go get them to subscribe. Don't do alt accounts because that's cheating, but friends, family, people you know, get them to subscribe to this channel because that will push us to 100K. We did like 700 subscribers last Saturday. That's insane. That's the most amount of subscribers we've done in a long time, and if we can replicate that here, that would be amazing. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get to 100K, get people you know to subscribe. And yeah, so once again, thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video on Saturday.